Today on the Wrestling Roundtable,
What?
The best and worst promos,
What?
And the career
What?
Of Stone Cold,
What?
Steve,
What?
Austin.
What? What?
Welcome to the Wrestling Roundtable. I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. Been a fan of wrestling 23 years, worked in it 7 years, actually a lot longer than 7 years at this rate. But introducing the panel, sitting to my left, which is your right, Will Effin Brooks. He's in our chat room every Monday night, and he's been a fan for also 23 years. Sitting to my right, which is your left, Orlando O'Neill, been a fan of 21 years, and Will TLD Vafides, fan of 22 years, but you've got an event coming up in Jackson, New Jersey.
Yes, I have a show March 25th coming up in Jackson, New Jersey. It's at the Knights of Columbus in Jackson, 2 o'clock show. $10 ticket. It is going to be tremendous, and the best part is it's going to show a history of what I've gone through, and you can be a part of that. Our live show number 3, it's going to be great.
Where can we get tickets?
We can get tickets actually at the door because we're not selling them ahead of time, so we are offering them at the Knights of Columbus at Jackson. Look it up. You can Google. $10 tickets. It's 2-3 hour show. You can't miss it.
We'll see at B4W on that Sunday, but we also want to remind you to go to WrestlingRoundtable.com, support the show, get the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt, what little sizes we have left, but maybe it's your size. And we've also got a lot more at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Now, the career of Stone Cold Steve Austin, still a name at the tips of everybody's tongue. Now with CM Punk wrestling Jericho, a lot of people thought it might be Austin, maybe next year at Yankee Stadium
really
or whatever.
that.
But we'll see. We know that's the match they want to do, but I don't know if Austin's physically ready for it or maybe he cares. He feels like he's got one more match. Maybe that'll be it if he's not making Expendables 3 or whatever by then. But let's go back and look at the career of Stone Cold Steve Austin because he is one of the biggest stars, if not the, in pro wrestling history. But he had a very interesting backstory, starting in the 80s, training with Dutch Mantel in World Class in Texas, migrating from there to Memphis, where he got involved with his trainer, Chris Adams, in an on-air feud, and then, of course, segueing into WCW, where he started really getting a big name. He actually won every title in WCW except the world title, and I guess that was a little bit of contention there, because he split with WCW at some point. Eric Bischoff fired him with a FedEx and all that famous story that we heard in ECW, because that's where he ended up next for a little cup of coffee and got a little taste of the Stone Cold character he would really become bigger with in the WWF, which is where he went to then. And of course, the rest is history. Broke his neck in the summer of '97, really changed up his style, but it didn't stop him from being the biggest star they had. Bigger they would get in the next couple years, and Stone Cold was at the top of that. He had a good supporting cast like Hogan did in the 80s, but he was the figure, the top guy. Unfortunately, this is at the end of his career, and all those injuries really started adding up, and it was really a lot shorter than we wish it would have been. He did stick around as an on-air character before getting into movies, and that's where he is today. So I mentioned WCW, and being that it was such an important part of his character, I was held down for 8 years and whatever, that was like the angst of the Stone Cold character in the WWF, and really set the stage for facing the boss. Instead of Eric Bischoff, of course, it's Vince McMahon in this case. But looking back on it, there are two sides to every story. Of course, Bischoff has said something different. Austin was playing hardball. He wasn't showing up to work. He was wrestling in Japan in their New Japan tour because there was a talent trade. And there was...
He was injured.
Right.
On that tour.
So do you think that Austin was 100% in the right, or is there a little mud in the water?
I think Austin was 100% in the right. I mean, if you look at his track record in WCW, the man was a star. He was legit. He was the longest reigning TV champion. He was crazy over with Brian Pillman as the Hollywood Blondes, which they shut that one down. He had a big feud for the U.S. title with Ricky Steamboat. And it's like once Ricky Steamboat got injured and he retired, then they really had nothing for Steve Austin to do. They jobbed him out to Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Well, do you think Hogan coming in had a lot to do with that?
Kind of. I think Hogan, he's definitely not going to put over somebody that's coming from the mid-card to the main event over. Hogan only wants to wrestle the big monster guys. That's why he squashed Vader. He squashed Avalanche, Earthquake, Kamala. They had all these big guys come into WCW at that time. And there was no way in hell Hogan was going to put over an upcoming rising Steve Austin.
Okay, but his thing, and it reminds me a lot of the Radicals and guys like Jericho and Big Show leaving, it seemed like, at least as far as the Radicals go, we don't care if we're pushed to the world title. He seemed to, but we don't care if we're pushed. We just want respect, and we weren't getting it in WCW. Do you think that's the big part of the story?
I do. I think they had respect for those guys right in the beginning. I think they were the workhorse of the show. But once WCW started buying all these big names, that's where the focus went. It went to that, and now all the guys underneath are getting the no rub, no nothing, and they don't care about them anymore. They really just did not care. So you got to look at it in a company in Eric Bischoff thinking, well, I got to push Hulk Hogan because he's going to make me the money.
I paid a lot for it, too.
Right, and I paid a lot for it, but for Stone Cold or Steve Austin at the time,
Stunning
Steve Austin, that guy's not going to give me the buy rates.
Not only that, but if you look at WCW during that time, the whole 94, 95, when Hogan comes in and brings in all these people, look at all the people that WCW let go. Steve Austin, Brian Pillman, Mick Foley, Vader, Ron Simmons. These are all Dustin Rhodes. These are all people that Vince McMahon made stars out of and helped them launch the Attitude Era.
Well, what was the appeal of Stone Cold Steve Austin that people really latched onto and maybe didn't see that side of him in WCW? What was brought out in the WWF that people really liked?
Because he didn't take shit. He fought everyone, and he beat up his boss. We've all had bosses we wanted to punch in the face. He did it. Everybody wanted to talk shit. He did it and backed it up.
Do you think a lot of that had to do with being the opposite of the Pirates and the Dentists that were there a few years before?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Austin was the everyday man, especially
he was real.
He appealed to the real man. He cursed, he drank beer, he hated his boss, and he was a rebel.
He went on to become the biggest star that WWF ever had. But one thing I always found curious was in the year 2000. That was the year he was out because he finally had to get that neck surgery. He showed up again in November with Survivor Series and was only there at the tail end of the year. That was their biggest year ever in their most publicly accepted by the mainstream time, the Attitude Era. So what do you think it says that the biggest star they had wasn't there in their biggest year?
Well, I think that Stone Cold already built up enough fan base to where now you have guys like Triple H, you have The Rock, you have Undertaker with a new look. Austin was not only the center point, but once that center point was gone, they already had enough people there to kind of continue that run. Stone Cold helped build almost all those guys I just mentioned. And they didn't need him there anymore because now they had Undertaker, they had Triple H, they had The Rock, Mick Foley. They were building all those guys up. So, yeah, I could see that being successful. On top of it, all the younger talent now as well was growing at the same time. Everybody.
They had a good roster.
They had a phenomenal roster. It was the best
just
roster
without
out
the
there.
guy who was at the helm really before. And speaking of guys at the helm, we've mentioned, and it's funny how we end up comparing him to Hogan all the time. Well, the thing that people always say about Hogan, the haters, is in the 80s, anybody could have done that. Hogan was just lucky and happened to be in that position, and I think that's a bullshit fucking argument. But how come no one ever says that about Stone Cold? You think it would be easier because why don't people say then if it could have been anybody who's drinking beer and saying ass on TV, how come no one says that about Austin?
He was one of a kind. He was exactly one of a kind. No one else had been the rebel to the extent that he was and made it look so cool and just bucking the system like he was.
Especially when they would make Jarrett, don't piss me off, and badass Billy Gunn. No one ever seemed, if they were trying something Austin-ish to get to that level.
It didn't seem real. It didn't seem legit when you have other people trying to play the rebel role. But when you have someone that's legit, he's lived it, he feels strongly about his feelings, then everybody's going to relate to it.
Not to mention he has the history in wrestling already to kind of back that up as well.
The backstory.
The backstory. He's got the backstory of WCW.
Yeah, what's Billy Gunn pissed off about?
Yeah, exactly. Billy Gunn is doing rockabilly. I mean, he came in as the ringmaster, but thank God after a couple of months they switched that around. They let him be what he wants, and not to mention he came up with a very marketable name as well.
I often wonder, because I've mentioned it on the show before, how the main event style changed to accommodate Austin once he got hurt. He was a great wrestler and was hanging with Owen in a great match at SummerSlam 97 before he got hurt. You fast forward a year later, and you see that all the main events that he's in, great brawls as they are, I'm not taking it away from them, but I'm just saying that the style is very different. And it was really to cover up for a lot of his physical limitations. Brawls in the crowd, spots on the tables, finishers all the time, and hardcore stuff. How different do you think the Attitude Era would be if Austin had never gotten hurt? Do you think there would be more emphasis on wrestling than what they had, or was it going in that direction anyway?
No, it was definitely going in that direction anyway. I mean, if you look at the matches back then, even Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, they were big brawls. That's the kind of direction that WWF was going towards that way anyway. So I think Austin getting hurt, he was a lot more comfortable fighting
in that limitation.
And that's having
Right,
limitation.
and at that point, he was already big enough where he doesn't need to do anything spectacular. Like Hulk Hogan never did anything spectacular as far as a pro wrestler is concerned.
So instead of power slams, it's table spots.
It's table spots, it's Luthes presses, and it's a Stone Cold Stunner, and you call it a night. Not to mention that sometimes when they took the moves, especially like The Rock, who took a stunner better than anybody, would oversell it to the level where it was just great to watch.
Scott Hall took it pretty well.
Yeah, the little jump he took, yep.
I actually think it would have been a little bit more mixed. I mean, I think they were, again, like, you'll go in that direction, but I still think if you have a guy who can wrestle, you showcase
Why not?
it. Yeah, you showcase it. I'm like, not saying you have to have a 5-star classic every night, but you can have a good matches with guys. Do it.
He did that also. If you put him in the ring against Kurt Angle or he who we did not speak
No,
of,
That was
after the
after
surgery,
the neck surgery.
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, the groundwork was set when he was hurt.
Right.
And even though Vince Russo loved ECW
Right.
and wanted to do that sort of style, there were at least people there like Jim Ross, Jim Cornette, people who knew him for years who could have been like, why don't you let him go if he can go?
Yeah,
So
right.
maybe things would have turned out a little different. Maybe it would have been a little more wrestling-centric and not so much 20-minute opening promos at the beginning of Raw, which we're still enduring to this day. But we're going to talk some more about the career of Stone Cold, or is it Stunning, Steve Austin when we come back.
But it was brutal. 2-mile run, 500 free squats, 200 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, 30-degree weather if it was that warm.
Well, the hardest thing about training was the fact that we were getting thrown around and we were, just hitting the ropes. Your whole body, turned purple, and we didn't have any padding.
And I remember looking up in the ring and watching these guys get hit in the back and in the stomach and in the head with chairs, and I was like, you know what? I just made my mind. I don't think I want to do this. I don't have a helmet on.
$3,000, where I grew up was a lot of money. I mean, in college I got scholarship, so it didn't cost my family a great deal of money. Push comes to shove, I borrowed the money. The next day, walked in with boom, $3,000. I'm like, I want to do this. It was I got called out on it. It was like, can you do it? I got my ass kicked.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. Look at our archives on Go Fight Live, Blog Talk Radio, and iTunes. Every show we've ever done is on iTunes and Blog Talk Radio. Go Fight Live, a little more selective, but there are no interruptions, and you can order Go Fight Live events through our site. Go to the video/audio section under matches, and anything that's on Go Fight Live, MMA, boxing, Muay Thai, pro wrestling, whatever you want to buy, get it through our site. Joining the panel to my left, which is your right, joining us for the first time is Jenny Rose. She's been a wrestler for 2 years, been a fan of 13 years, and you started watching wrestling in the Attitude Era with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I'm sure that goes for a lot of people. There are some older fans who maybe, if they haven't been watching straight through all their lives, maybe stopped watching when it wasn't cool, and then the Attitude Era brought them back in. This is when you started, and when Austin became the star that he was. He was on Nash Bridges, and on Regis, and all over the place.
Mad TV, SNL.
Exactly. So he became accepted and became a big star. But so did Hulk Hogan in the 80s, and I hate to keep going back to Hulk Hogan, but people hate on Hulk Hogan so much on the internet right now. Is it because Austin's a better worker or whatever the fuck? But you never see the same criticisms labeled to Austin than you do to Hogan. Austin beat his wife, Deborah. It was famous on the news. He ran away from the police. He left WWE when he didn't get his way, and he said, fuck this, and left. Brock Lesnar's vilified for that. But Austin, no matter what, whether he's being the sheriff and sucking the heat away from everyone he's involved in and not getting anybody over, which is what happened in 2003, no matter what, Austin's cool. Austin gets the pop no matter what. And it never seems like they get tired of him. What is that appeal there? We know what started it off with the rivalry with Vince McMahon, but what has given him the longevity that people genuinely like him all the way through?
It's all about respecting what he did for the business and what he's done as far as wrestling-wise, making the championship belt very important. I think the problem with Hogan is he goes around everywhere. He does it for the money. I think Austin...
Well, he has to now.
Well, he has to now with his... Well, that's a whole other story, right?
I know there's the divorce, but you don't think that Hogan has passion to keep doing this for 30 years?
I think he does it to market Hulkamania. I think Stone Cold comes back for reasons that are right. Tough Enough is a perfect example where he's helped training younger stars, building them up.
Hogan Celebrity Championship Wrestling.
That's not the same thing at all, please. I think that's a respectable show. He helps younger talent either by getting them, and I know you say he kind of buries them sometimes, but he also gets them a little bit over. Like when he gets in with CM Punk or when he got involved with The Miz, that still gives something to the other person.
Well, for everyone that he did do that, what about the Carlitos and the Rene Duprees and all the other people, and Storm that he was involved with that he didn't?
Right.
Yeah, well, I think he gets a pass because he doesn't hide behind anything that he did. He owns up to it, and I think that's another admirable trait that Stone Cold has.
There's some mysteries about the whole relationship with Hogan and the wife thing. You don't know who's right and who's wrong. Austin admits he's wrong, or he's right, depending on what the situation is.
Well, I know I'm going to get killed for bringing up Hulk Hogan so much in a topic about Stone Cold Steve Austin, but it always comes down to those two, doesn't it? Which one is the biggest star ever? Who do you think it is?
It's hard to say. I mean, I started watching because of Stone Cold. I mean, I wasn't around during Hulk Hogan's time, but of course I knew who Hulk Hogan was.
Right.
It's really a tough decision.
I know, adjusted for inflation, maybe Austin drew more money, but there were more outlets then. I mean, Cena blows them all away now because it keeps growing.
It's a totally different time.
Yeah, it's really tough to say. I would say that because the industry itself grew because of that, I would say Austin. Because even though wrestling was at the beginning stages where Hogan was building it up, Austin was the man that took it to the level that made it the biggest thing.
Super Bowl ads.
Super Bowl-esque, where now WrestleMania is in $40,000, $50,000 stadiums, seats, you know. I apologize. Yeah, I mean, messed up. That's what I look at as where wrestling has gone, and I think Austin was driven, along with The Rock, now I would say is just as big as Stone Cold. I would say, yeah, I think Austin was bigger in that aspect.
Well, I mentioned Hogan's passion. I don't think he's in it just for the money. I think he really genuinely loves wrestling to keep doing it so long and in this shape. But that's the difference really to me, because Hogan's had a really long run.
Right.
And when we look back, we were just talking about it, Stone Cold's was actually really short. He was only on the top for a couple years, even with the neck surgery. So who do you think it is?
Hulk Hogan. Hogan was the guy to take the WWF from the territory northeast to the whole country, to the whole world. Him and Andre the Giant put 93,000 people into WrestleMania 3, and I think Hogan took the WWF into another level that Austin then took and brought it even more into the mainstream.
It's really close. I mean, because you look at someone who, like, Hogan really was the biggest face of all time, but also became the biggest heel of all time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's hard.
And Austin's heel run didn't really work.
No, his heel run didn't work out the way I think that he wanted, and he explains that in the documentary that he came out with. You should buy it, by the way.
Through our Amazon shop.
Through our Amazon shop. I buy stuff all the time there. It's really hard to say. I think it's always going to be that argument, and it's never going to end because there's no real answer. Because the only one that can answer that is Vince McMahon, because he has the numbers. And that really, in the end of the day, is all that matters, right, is making the money.
Well, mentioning Hogan so much, that's a dream match that we never got.
And should have gotten.
We should have gotten. They tried setting it up a couple times, and it seemed like there was a little window in there after they bought WCW, of course, when everyone was starting to come in, and NWO Stein or whatever. Around that time, ruthless aggression, whatever you want to call it, that they probably could have gotten it done. So is that the dream match that never happened?
That is going to be the match, and like I said, I was at 18 where The Rock kind of replaced it, and I think Austin even talks about that scenario with him and Hogan facing each other. But that is the one match that I think the entire world would want to see.
Not Goldberg? Was Goldberg like too much of a flash in the pan? Because at the time in WCW Nitro, Raw, that was the match. But has Hogan and Austin stood the test of time?
I would say Hulk Hogan versus Stone Cold.
Yeah, I'd say Hogan versus Stone Cold, but if you asked me in 1998, Steve Austin and Goldberg. Because if you looked at every single wrestling magazine or anything at
that was the cover of like PWI.
Those two.
WCW, Goldberg was a guy.
Yeah.
And WWF, it was Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Especially in '98 when they were both on top.
Yeah.
But that was '98, and there were lots of great moments in Austin's initial title run. So what were some of your favorite Steve Austin moments?
The Booker T supermarket one, because that one was hilarious. It's like so random, too, that Booker T's just out at a supermarket, and Ric Flair's like, watch this, something good to show you. And then the fact that they were in front of the supermarket, God bless the supermarket, wherever that was.
That's the first thing that comes to mind, really.
I would want to know. Please contact us. If you were a manager of that supermarket, contact us and let us know. I would love to go. Who said let these guys in there and destroy that place up.
The Invasion SmackDown where Stone Cold sings Kumbaya to Vince McMahon. That was one of the most funniest things I've ever seen in my life. Vince McMahon was going nuts. It was hilarious. If you haven't seen it, YouTube it.
It's funny.
It's interesting that the two first opinions that come up are comedy. But what's yours? This is when Austin really became a name during your childhood,
Yes,
and
definitely.
a lot of it wasn't so ha-ha. It was more kick your ass.
Definitely. And for me, it was the beer bath. That was tremendous. I've never seen anything like that before. That's definitely my favorite Stone Cold moment.
Actually, mine is vehicle involved because there were so many vehicle
Oh,
God, yeah.
incidents with Steve Austin.
You wanna
But
talk
mine
about?
would be the Zamboni. Now,
Right.
granted, it's not just for Austin alone because that segment with McMahon, Undertaker, Kane, whatever was great. But Austin's was a big part of that because we'd seen him drive pickups and cars and
Monster
didn't
trucks.
get to the monster truck just yet. That was in the future, but the theme was there, and a Zamboni. It was like, and he runs over the light, and he bumps into the ring and does a clothesline
Over the
after
cops.
flipping the finger and then clotheslining McMahon in the middle. I was caught up in that frenzy. It was a really great segment, and there's so many more.
Anything involving Stone Cold and Vince McMahon.
Yeah, like-
I would think another one too is when he was dressing up as a corporate champion. And he was like dressing up, walking out
After
with the
WrestleMania
belt.
14?
And he's like, instead
Yeah.
of going up and doing the middle finger, Vince is like doing this, and he's like, I'm gonna do that.
And he hit him in the
And then he hit
balls.
him right in the balls, and that's when he had the one wish in
Yeah.
hell yeah, that's where that came from. That was one of my favorites too. That because you really thought that he's really gonna do that because you would take Vince McMahon for granted, saying he's gonna make him a corporate champion no matter what.
It's not really the blow off because it continued, but they did
Right.
have a steel cage match at St. Valentine's Day
Yeah.
Massacre, which I really feel was a month too early. That McMahon-Austin feud was big enough to main event WrestleMania,
Right, it was.
which it really should have,
Right.
but they put The Rock in there as the corporate champion, and people like that in and of itself. But what were some of your favorite Steve Austin matches?
Definitely the submission match is my top favorite match.
With Bret Hart at
with
WrestleMania
Bret Hart-
13.
With Bret Hart at 13. Just a great overall story. And the fact that they made a heel and a face switch right in the middle of the whole situation.
It was a brutal match, too.
It was
Oh,
a brutal match. I mean, and then you get the famous image where Austin is
Blood from a
fighting
stone.
as a fighting guy, trying to kick out as one of the most memorable images that will always be in your head.
Let me point out something about that finish because so many promotions and wrestlers have tried copying it since.
Right.
And here's why it makes sense for Austin. When you see people that are put in leg locks and stuff and they pass out due to the pain, this isn't fucking Vietnam torture.
right.
I think you could survive your consciousness being
Right.
put in an ankle lock or something. But the reason it worked for Austin, which is what everyone's trying to copy, they don't realize Austin was bleeding.
Right.
He was
busted.
losing his plasma, his
Right.
life spirit,
Right.
and he was being put out because of the pain. It was a little more story.
There's a
to it.
little more into it when you see the guy's bleeding. You feel sorry for the guy because he's bleeding. He's stuck in.
And he's
this
not
hole,
giving up.
and he's not giving up, which makes him look like a face. And Bret Hart does not care about that at all. And again, that's what makes
a
it a
blood feud.
perfect switch. And one of the best ideas they ever did.
They also had a great match at Survivor Series
Oh yeah, and
96
I was
in
actually
MSG.
at that. I was actually at that match, and that was great because I was a Bret Hart fan, and going into that, I didn't like Steve Austin, and over that time, I did exactly what they wanted you to do. You switched, and I did exactly that.
Anyone against The Rock. They're just two strong personalities that go very well against each other.
Chemistry.
Definitely.
I like the DX in your house match they had, one of their first on pay-per-view, because that was just chaos.
That's with the truck,
With the
right?
truck, Nation
Just,
members getting backdropped into glass, and of course, the blow-off sometime after that was Austin throwing the Intercontinental belt off the bridge, which was a great blow-off. But of all the WrestleMania matches, my favorite, of course, is 17. I thought that was a classic up until the finish. That's a little iffy, but
If you bought the new DVD, it has a match with him and Ric Flair against Sting and Ricky Steamboat on WCW Saturday Night. 25 minutes of straight non-stop action. These are four guys that were either in their prime or maybe a year or two after, but all these guys could still go and they put on a great match.
well, hopefully we put on a great segment. We're going to move on now because speaking of Steve Austin, one of the best promos of all time, we're going to find out if he's on that list. I'm sure he will be, but also some of the worst. Best and worst promos when we come back.